That's how we're gonna do it. Black boy, tell me how you really feel. I just wanna build with you. Black girl, tell me how you really feel. I just wanna keep it real with you. I wanna live better, eat better. I wanna love better, sleep better. I wanna feel so aligned, sublime. One time for the state of mind, two times for elevated rhymes. Know I architected when I lay design. I drown noise out of the clear blue. I sit, twist the threads of said silence. That's an heirloom. I am the shepherd, I share sheep. Still fleece funds from the have-it-alls to the matadors who sidestep the bull beautifully to that applause. Around rappers, a higher caliber catalog shines, reminds I ain't coming to flatter y'all. I spark chatter, dark matter, the sharks scatter on these dark waters. Who walk taller, who barks orders? God body, guarding what all the laws taught us. Not a peer, it's rear, they veer near. I pierce deep, I'm revered. My steps remain clear with fierce sweeps. Not a man here who could censor me. I'm on the pier, Elohim with the energy. Black boy, tell me how you really feel. I just wanna build with you. Black girl, tell me how you really feel. I just wanna keep it real with you. I wanna live better, eat better. Yeah. I wanna love better, sleep better. Yeah, I wanna feel so aligned. Let me talk to y'all over here. Sublime. One time for elevated rhymes, two times for showmanship, three times for black hands and land ownership. Revolution.
Welcome, everybody. What's happening? If you're watching on YouTube, please put a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Just want to make sure my audio is coming in clean. Also, if you're watching on Instagram, please feel free to put a thumbs up in that chat as well. Gary says, good to see you back on the hustle. It is a hustle, low key, man. Putting these streams together is more than meets the eye. What's up, everybody? If you're watching on Instagram, the stream is only going to temporarily be here. So please click the link in the bio and go over to YouTube. Right now, we've got 14 people on Instagram, 30 people on YouTube. So y'all head on over to the YouTube. This is going to be a good one. This is one, actually, I was going to do as a case study because I've been stewing about it, or I've been stewing over it for a while. But, since I'm trying to, Vince says a little low but clear. Let me see. All right, how about that? Is that a little better? But yeah, since I'm going to start back doing lives, I thought, why not just do it as a live? And then if we need to clip it up, we can do that and make it, a shorter kind of case study format. So the subject matter today, or the title for this stream, is Women Are Filmmakers. And I promise I will explain. All right, Vince, that sounds better? All right, yes, sir. I will explain, but it's something I've been, thinking about for a while. So before that, though, I came across this clip on Instagram. I actually reshared it on our story, but I thought it was an interesting PSA to kind of get us started. And also, on the heels of the last live stream, which was 2 weeks ago, I think this is a perfect segue. So I'm going to play it, and then we will get started. All right. Again, if you're watching on Instagram, click the link in the bio and slide over to YouTube. But yeah, we'll be on Instagram probably. I give you all 15 minutes, and then we're on YouTube. All right. So let me play this, and we'll get started.
Here is the hard truth, fellas. Being handsome doesn't keep a woman. Being honest doesn't keep a woman. Being loyal doesn't keep a woman. Being there for a woman doesn't keep a woman. Treating a woman well doesn't keep a woman. Making an effort doesn't keep a woman. Caring about a woman doesn't keep a woman. Spending time with a woman doesn't keep a woman. You could have the best intentions, you could have the most sincere feelings, and you could be a good man and still wouldn't be able to keep a woman. Because the only way to keep a woman is if that woman wants to be kept by you. You can't force a woman to be with you. You can't beg a woman to stay with you. You can't make a woman to love you. A woman that wants to be kept when the relationship gets hard will do everything to fight for you. Because a woman only fights for a fella she wants to belong to. So if she isn't fighting for you when things get hard, she doesn't want to be kept by you. Here is the hard truth, fellas. Being handsome doesn't keep a woman. Being honest doesn't keep a woman. Being loyal doesn't keep a woman. Being there for a woman doesn't keep a woman. Treating a woman well doesn't keep a woman. Making an effort doesn't keep a woman. Caring about a woman doesn't keep a woman. Spending time with a woman doesn't keep a woman. You could have the best intentions, you could have the most sincere feelings, and you could be a good man and still wouldn't be able to keep a woman. Because the only way to keep a woman is if that woman wants to be kept by you. You can't force a woman to be with you. You can't beg a woman to stay with you. You can't make a woman to love you. A woman that wants to be kept when the relationship gets hard will do everything to fight for you. Because a woman only fights for a fella she wants to belong to. So if she isn't fighting for you when things get hard, she doesn't want to be kept by you.
All right. All right. So, like I said, I found that clip a couple of days ago. And I thought it was fantastic on the heels of our last conversation. And also, our ongoing conversation. For the folks on YouTube, you guys know that my start on YouTube was interviewing women, these one-on-one interviews that I would do. And there are actually some clips on Instagram as well with the white background and the brown couch that people know about. But before that, I was conducting conversations with women on college campuses. So I've been fortunate enough in that experience and also in my personal life to pry and to get more insight into the inner workings of the female psyche. And I think that's so important because I think a lot of men's grievances with women and even, what led to spaces like the manosphere, what led to a lot of the gender dysfunction that we see is, in my opinion, on both sides, unfair expectations. I think men have a certain idea of women that is unfair based on the reality of who they are as humans. And vice versa, I think women have unrealistic, unfair expectations of men. And, on the male side, since, I'm a dude, I think part of the reason that some of that animosity builds within us is a lot of the game, because of our community, right? A lot of the game we get on women is from women. And a lot of that game is bullshit. Let's just keep it a buck. It's not true, right? And then you hear phrases like "fish can't teach fish how to fish." I mean, fish can't teach you how to fish. That's because a lot of times the women that we might get information from, whether it's our mothers, our aunties, female friends, sisters, they are idealistic in their advice. And, a lot of us at a young age, sometimes older, we observe that what they say they want versus what they respond to are completely different most of the time. And I think, it's a lack of self-awareness. I think it's an idealism as well. The tragic thing that tends to happen is a lot of men in our community were raised and reared by women. There were no men around, right? So you often see the son husband epidemic where women are raising boys to be the men that they wish they had. And oftentimes, there's a lot of dysfunction in that ideal, right? So you oftentimes you'll see single mothers dress their boys like the men who broke their hearts, but expect them to become neurosurgeons or something like it. But you still want little man to be, hood and street and all that other stuff that is in complete opposition to what he would need to be to become a neurosurgeon in disposition and discipline, and even in the way that he interacts with the community, right? But oftentimes we don't talk about that. So that's why when I see clips where women are telling the truth, it's just an amazing, profound thing to experience. And that's one of the things OGs will tell you about, the only woman who you can keep is a woman who wants to be kept. But I think a lot of times as men, we don't understand that. We might understand that in theory, but we don't understand it in practice. And more than that, I think we're also socialized to believe that our masculinity is correlated with our ability to win a woman over, right? Like most of the movies you're gonna watch, it's the woman didn't like him that much at the beginning, or she didn't like him at all, and he did some really cool shit, saved her life, whatever the case may be, and won her over. So I think a lot of us as men, we drank that Kool-Aid, and we don't understand that truth that this woman just spoke, until oftentimes it's too late. And, we criticize the Pookies and the Ray Rays of our community. Why do women want them? But we often don't get granular in trying to answer those questions earnestly and, thoroughly. And that's what I'm going to try to do a little bit of tonight with my theory, as you can see in the title, that women are filmmakers. So let me see. All right, Instagram folks, you got 3 more minutes before I end the live on Instagram. So head over to YouTube while you're there, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. But okay, so boom. After my time interviewing women, after my time dealing with women in my own personal life, I've had a lot of time to think and reflect and consider some of the experiences that I've had, some of the conversations that I've had, et cetera. And I think especially now that I'm a girl dad, it seems very necessary to begin to make sense of some of these things, or at least make them clearer in order to, when the time comes, better assist my daughter in making wise decisions for herself in her positioning, herself in her personal brand, and also in vetting men. But this women are filmmakers theory came about because I was dating this girl, and she really wanted me to try to grow out a beard. This is before beards were super, super mainstream. I didn't want to do it for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't have really good beard genetics. This is as good as it gets. You know what I'm saying? I'm never going to be Rick Ross. I made peace with that. It is what it is. But number two, I genuinely felt like I looked better with a more clean aesthetic, right? Like I would probably define my style as like smart, casual, clean cut. One of the best compliments I ever got from a woman, she said, "You look like your bathroom clean," and that always stuck out to me. So my preference is more clean cut, more dapper, the whole nine. But this particular woman really wanted me to go with a more scruffy look, and I never really understood it. And I would have conversations with women about it, and they one common theme is that they didn't like a man to look too manicured. You hear women often say, I don't want him to look like he spends more time in the mirror than me. I don't want him to look gay, all that kind of stuff. But then, with this new looks maxing wave that we're seeing on social media, there's been this term come up called sexual dimorphism. And basically, to explain sexual dimorphism, it's we prefer as men faces that look as feminine as possible and aesthetics overall that look as feminine as possible, and women prefer aesthetics overall that look as masculine as possible. In general. Now, some of that is starting to change because now women are starting to prefer a more effeminate aesthetic on men. That's why you see people like Timothy Chalamet is now the heartthrob of the decade. But typically women like raised brow ridges, which is a more masculine feature. Sharp jawlines, more masculine feature. Muscles, broad shoulders, all that stuff, more masculine features. And men are dimorphic in that sense because we like stuff that are on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. And again, it's not across the board, but it's for the most part. Because you also observe, even in the modeling world, that a lot of the model faces, especially high fashion, they have more masculine facial features, sharp jawlines, more chiseled facial features, etc. But again, I mean, even as I say that, take it with a grain of salt because the target demographic for those industries is also women. So maybe women also prefer sexually dimorphic women, right? So it really got me thinking, and I realized that the truth is what men find attractive in men isn't necessarily what women find attractive in men. And similarly, what women find attractive in women typically isn't what men find attractive in women. A quick example, there's a dude a man might see and he must get hoes. And you realize he doesn't, or you learn that he doesn't, right? Or, we talk about things like the butterfly eyelashes that women love. Women love it on women. Men either don't care or they hate it. I'm on the side of hate it, but, so you start noticing certain things like that. At this point, I'm going to cut off the Instagram stream. We're only on YouTube. So again, if you want to keep up with this conversation, if you want to join the conversation later on, click the link in the Instagram bio and you'll see a button that says YouTube channel. Click on that and this will be the first thing you see. All right. Y'all be good. Peace. All right. We are now exclusively on YouTube. So like I was saying, it really got me thinking about the differences between the male gaze and the female gaze, not just phenotypically, but also from a character and disposition standpoint. So, hold on. Move, cancel. Hold on 1 second, y'all. Because I cut off the Instagram, it kind of... And also, you guys will notice that the chat is also open to subscribers. Usually we are members only, but it's a little treat. I wanted to open up to everybody. But yeah, so like I was saying, the things that we think women like in men, women sometimes don't like. The things women think men like in women, we sometimes don't like. And I think it's complex for women more so than men because at least on the male side, you could be like, and so Fred, he has no host, and you can use his ability to attract and sleep with women as the barometer for if he is successful attracting women. On the female side, it's a bit more difficult because she may still or she will still attract men with those butterfly eyelashes. So she'll never actually think that men dislike it because she's still able to get in proximity to men, and sometimes men of caliber, because again, men are sexually less selective than women are. Right? Men are more so commitment selective, whereas women are sexually selective, and I think they're the consequences of both those sides are the reason why. But then I was having a conversation with a female friend of mine, and I don't even remember what led to the conversation, but we were talking about the movie They Cloned Tyrone. And by the way, if you've never seen that movie, 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, fantastic movie. The concept, the execution, the cast, the storyline, the plot, everything was fantastic. And this is where we're kind of segueing into the filmmaker piece. But she told me about this interview of or either she brought it up or I brought it up, but there's an interview, and I'll pull it up in a second. There's an interview of John Boyega, the actor who plays Tyrone, and then his doppelganger, which when you watch the movie, you'll understand why, sitting side by side having a conversation. And she told me that for whatever reason, she found Tyrone attractive right here. But she didn't find John Boyega that attractive, right? Now, this is the same person. And, we've seen like those fake viral memes where it's like a girl will comment a picture of, what's that UFC fighter's name with the glasses? I can't remember his name, but the latest one I saw, a girl commented a picture of Shawn Michaels, the WWE wrestler from back in the day. And she was like, why can't I find a man like this? And then literally Shawn Michaels responded and was like, he was like, something. And she was like, ew, get out of here. And he was like, I'm literally the guy. Right? And it goes to show my theory that women are filmmakers. And you might hear this from OGs, but like it's less about the aesthetic of you, and especially with this emphasis of on looks maxing, and it's more about the story of you, right? One of the best pieces of advice that I heard was women don't necessarily remember what you do, but they remember how you make them feel, right? And even going back to this Tyrone versus John Boyega image, the only difference is as a character, Tyrone appears more layered than John Boyega, right? He's scruffier, he's rougher around the edges. I also believe when women say tall, dark, and handsome, I don't think they're always talking about like literally dark. I think sometimes they're talking about like proverbially dark, right? Mysterious, enigmatic, all those other things that I think we then condense or oversimplify into dark. But yeah, so that really got me thinking, like, how can she see an image of two versions of the same guy, and the one who is worse looking from a male perspective is the one she finds more attractive? And another conversation I had was with, I think, two different women at this point, and I think I was talking about how as the guys we get older, our hairlines recede, and I'm kind of getting insecure about mine receding, and both of them said something along the lines of, we actually don't like hairlines that are too crispy, overly manicured, overly sharp. And it really threw me for a loop because, as a man, especially as a black man, that has been your mission since you started getting haircuts, is to get the most sharpest, most symmetrical, most crispiest lineup that you can get. But according to these conversations, it seems to be the case that our lineups are akin to some aspect of what women do to pamper themselves for us that we don't really care about, right? It might be something that they notice subconsciously, right? Like if a woman has eyeshadow or something, it might make her look better, right? But it's not necessarily a make or break the way that we think it is, or the way that if we saw it in another dude, we think it would be, right? And that goes back to the male gaze and the female gaze. So, as some of you guys know, if I wasn't if I didn't have to work, I got a corporate job or whatever, I would be a full-time filmmaker. I'd be making documentaries about black folks, black culture, black history, the Pan-African connection. But, I'm not there yet. I will be there one day. But one of the people who inspired me was Ava DuVernay, right? And part of the reason that I was inspired is like the way that she tied together stories. I thought was beautiful. I thought it was compelling, particularly 13th. If you guys have never seen 13th, the documentary, it's a brilliant piece of work. It is the way that she tied the 13th Amendment to mass incarceration. Brilliant, right? But as a filmmaker, there are multiple things that you have to think of and consider as you are going through pre-production, as you are going through production and post-production. And what's often kind of overlooked, and I think this is where I think women have a better understanding than us, right? Hence, women being filmmakers, is that pretty stories aren't interesting. Polished stories aren't interesting. So if you are, in the film industry, or you are a writer, or whatever the case may be, you've probably come across the term story arc, right? Or in another way, it's called a 3-act structure, right? There is the exposition. That's the beginning. These are the characters. Here's where we are. Here is the thing that we are fighting for, or the thing that this story is going to be about. There's the climax. Pun is very intended. It's a double entendre, and I'll get to it. And then there's the resolution, right? And then you have some stories that are cyclical. It goes status quo. This is the real world. Fantasy. Here's the imagined world, or a better world. And then going back to the real world, right? And I say that to say, because of how women dispositionally are, I think they're a bit more familiar with that perspective on life than men are. And I don't think it's necessarily just a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing in some sense, but I think it's also a good thing in some sense. That's why we say, men build a house, women make it a home. Story. Or women make life worth living. Story, right? Women are the decoration. Women are the joy, right? One of my favorite songs by Hosier, it's called "Take Me to Church." He said she's the giggle at a funeral, right? Women, there is an essence that women carry that is not just intoxicating, but inspiring, right? And I think as a filmmaker, you have to have a similar essence. You have to have a similar eye. You have to have a similar perspective. And that perspective is what helps you tell more compelling stories. So, some of the things that you learn as a filmmaker, which I think translates perfectly to the male female dynamic, is a concept called dirtying the frame, right? As a storyteller, you want to create depth and dimension with your characters. You want to create depth and dimension with your environments. You want to create depth and dimension with your perspectives as well, right? Like there's a certain reason why Stanley Kubrick put the camera over here versus over there, or the B shot was shot low looking up versus high looking down. Like all these things are very, very intentional as filmmakers, and I think that women, unlike men, are a bit more sensitive to and a bit more excited about, enthusiastic about the process of her life as a story and the characters in that story. I think when that's expressed healthily, it leads to creating adventures with other healthy, like minded individuals, right? When that's expressed unhealthily, it also results in adventures, but sometimes the adventure is riding around with your dope dealer boyfriend. Sometimes the adventure is domestic violence. Sometimes the adventure is, we're going to break up, get back together, break up and get back together. But the reality is, and this is counterintuitive, dysfunction from the perspective of a filmmaker, and ironically from the perspective of a woman, is more interesting than function. Dysfunction is more interesting than function. So like I said, from the perspective of a filmmaker, texture is interesting, right? I would rather shoot somebody with wrinkled skin than somebody with flawless skin as a filmmaker, especially depending on the story that I'm telling, because the visual, because again, all videos are, all movies are motion pictures. They are pictures in motion, right? So, people say a picture is worth 1,000 words, only if it's interesting, right? If it's not interesting, then 1,000 words have to come from somewhere else. Now, the picture, for instance, of a very old face, and please y'all stick with me, has a lot more to say than the picture of a very young face, for instance. Just by looking at that picture, every wrinkle essentially tells a story and evokes curiosity from the viewer of those stories, right? So from the perspective of a filmmaker, I want faces that look interesting. I want texture. I want dynamic. I want compelling. And similarly, I think as men, since we want peace, since we want predictability, since we want ease, since we want structure, it baffles us, it perplexes us how somebody could want texture and difficult and dysfunction, etc. Right? But again, outside of just the unhealthy piece, I think it's important to understand how women's minds work relative to ours, right? That's why I think, other than, it's also a fad, right? It's in style right now. But I think that's why facial hair for women is a bit more interesting from an aesthetic standpoint than smooth skin, than just a smooth, cleanly shaven face. It looks more mature. It looks more grizzled. It looks like there are more synonyms that you could come up with for the texture that is achieved with additional facial hair than nothing. So when I see, going back to the image of Tyrone and the actor who plays him, John Boyega, from the perspective of a filmmaker and a woman, this aesthetic tells more stories than this aesthetic. And if we go back to the understanding that for women, the story is the most important piece, it starts to make a bit more sense. So let's pause for a minute, because I know I'm afraid that I might be sounding too esoteric, or like I'm making excuses for women, or whatever the case may be. But again, like, I think the purpose of this channel in general is to bridge the gaps of understanding. So I'm hoping by this perspective that I have, maybe there's a bit more understanding of not how women think per se, because again, this is just my theory, but an understanding of the difference in how we think, right? Because a lot of this shit, that's why usually I call it a paradox, right? A lot of this shit doesn't make any sense, and I don't think it's supposed to. But I think our ability to understand it and navigate it is our strength as men. You know, I think just looks maxing is a mistake if you don't understand some of the psychological things that are also associated with attracting women, because then you only attract a certain type of woman who's only interested in consuming men physically, right? That's the reality that a lot of pickup artists won't tell you. But I think the other thing too is, you know, life in general. If I ever write a book, I might title it "Life is About Me." And me is an acronym for managing expectations. I think that misery and sadness and an inability to cope is in direct correlation with your expectations of life, of situations, of events, of people either being met or not being met, right? And I think, unfortunately, at least I can speak for myself, a lot of the dysfunction that I've had with women in my life, outside of her actions or my actions, was directly correlated with my expectations of who I thought women were. And also my expectations of who I thought I had to be for them. And the process of learning what's true, what's not, what works and what doesn't, right? So things like this theory that women are filmmakers is my attempt to try to make sense of that. I'm sorry. Now, another thing that filmmakers care about, and I think is a perfect metaphor for what women care about, is a concept called dynamic range, right? If there are any videographers watching, filmmakers watching, they understand exactly what I mean. But for you know, those of you who might not, oftentimes when you are looking for a camera, your first camera, a film camera, whatever the case may be, one of the things that you use to compare and contrast is dynamic range. There is a very complex explanation that I don't think I'm qualified to deliver, so I'll give the simple explanation. If a camera is really good, it can see details in very, very light areas of a shot and very, very dark areas of a shot simultaneously. Right? So if a camera is really bad, then black is black. Like, let's say a woman is wearing a black dress, it's just going to be black. And she has light skin, it's just going to be light. But if you're shooting her with a camera that has high dynamic range, you'll be able to see the texture in the black dress. You'll be able to see the color variations in her skin, even though her skin is really bright and her dress is really light, right? And I think similarly, women care a lot about that ability to see and observe, experience, enjoy the nuance in humanity. And I think that it stands in direct opposition of what men are taught to be, because everything we're taught to be is anti-human, right? Because think about it, like we're taught to be warriors, we're taught to be providers, we're taught to be protectors, and literally to execute any of those things at the highest level, you have to be anti-human. You have to be non-human to a degree, right? You feel pain, but you don't stop. That's not human. You're sad, but you still work, you still persevere, you don't cry, whatever the case may be. That is anti-human. You know death is impending, but you still run full speed into battle. You know death is impending, but you still march down into a coal mine. Like, men are taught to be the antithesis of human. And womanhood, femininity, I think in a way, unlike masculinity, celebrates the dynamic range of humanity. Right. And again, going back to our John Boyega and Tyrone example, even just visually, there are a lot more details in the dark and in the light of his character than his. Right. And I think, I believe, I could be very, very wrong, but I believe that's how women view men. That's how women view the world. One of the things Courtney and I would debate about was Tupac. Like many women, Tupac was her ideal archetype of a man. Tupac was all the contradictions that women love to imagine in one package, right? He was a poetic dude who was gangster and had money and was soft and hard at the same time, and all those contradictory things. My perspective is that he was playing a character. Like, he was, he was also a theater guy. So, I mean, it tracks. But when you hear most women try to describe their ideal man, they're describing Tupac essentially. Now, what's funny is there are even interviews of Tupac where he talked about how he also saw the dramatic shift of the female attention he was getting before he was famous and the unusual female attention he was getting after he became famous. But that's beside the point. But it goes back to that dynamism that I think women idealize in a way that nobody actually explains to us as men, and which is why I think we have such a hard time and we become so frustrated and we have difficulties managing our expectations of who we need to be and how women are going to or not going to respond to it. You'll hear a lot of women say, for instance, I want a man who is in touch with his feminine side. I think that's what they're talking about. They're talking about that dynamic range. Now, if I was having a separate conversation with just women, I would tell them, hey, here's why some of these expectations of who you think men should be stand in direct opposition of other expectations that you think we should be based on our capacity to be these things in tandem. Right? Because again, women are filmmakers, so they're looking at the world through the lens of their movie. You also hear, you also see, I think, especially nowadays, a lot of women are into true crime. They did a poll and they found out that the Jeffrey Dahmer movie or documentary that came out on Netflix, and even the other guy, not Manson, the other guy, most of the viewers were women. Most of the viewers of true crime documentaries are women. Most of the viewers of First 48 and Snapped and all that good stuff is women. So it starts cluing you into the fact that women have a relationship. I'm not going to call it healthy or unhealthy, but women have a relationship with the macabre. Ted Bundy, God bless you. Women have a relationship with the macabre that I don't think we are as familiar with, right? Like women are, because I think also they're not as familiar with violence or the consequences of overt violence the way that men are historically. There's more space to fantasize about the pageantry of it, right? The idea, and good point, KW, like the whole men versus bears thing. Like there's more space to fantasize about it. And even like now recently Instagram has been recommending these clips and TikToks about like women's dark fantasy novels, right? And what they're into and all that stuff, and they're married but they've got a boyfriend in this book, so I say all that to say, I think one of the things we have to do as men is divorce ourselves of our expectations of women, whether those expectations were placed on us by media or placed on us by our mothers or placed on us by our aunties, sisters, whatever the case may be. And, this Puritan ideal that we have of who women are, I think the earlier you divorce yourself of it, and you make peace with that, I think the better off you are. Because I think the men who end up being traumatized, the men who end up having a hard time, are the ones who either that I'm gonna call it a detox, right? It's almost like when you're getting off a substance and your body goes into that state where it's even worse than when you were on the substance. I think that's what's going on with our expectation of who women are. And I think on the other side, whether you use a theory like this, that women are filmmakers and they care more about interesting than safe, or any other framing, it's easier for you to manage expectations. I mean, another example that comes to my mind, I saw this video of what's his name? Michael B. Jordan at the time where he was playing Killmonger. And some woman commented like, yo, I've never seen him look this sexy in my life. And literally the only difference was he had some hair and he had a grill in his mouth. That was it. But again, when you start thinking about it from the perspective of a filmmaker, Killmonger as a character was more textured. You could make the argument was even more textured than T'Challa himself. And if you notice, the women are the men that do really well with women, the men that women find irresistible. They're not always like phenotypically good looking men. Like even now you hear women say, I want a nigga who's medium ugly, whatever that means, right? Phenotypically, they're not always good looking men, but what you'll find is the stories associated with them, their experience with the guy, or, just the aesthetic that he gives across is, from a filmmaking perspective, far more interesting. And, I think there's something to be said about how we as men can adjust ourselves and also adjust our assessment of women and how deep in the fantasy she is based on this understanding. So there's a term that I came up with to kind of summarize this whole concept, but it's called organized chaos. I think the best way to frame how to anticipate what women respond to is organized chaos. I think we've established that women are inherently chaotic relative to men. And men crave order relative to women, right? I don't think men aren't also chaotic in our own ways, or there aren't chaotic men or organized women, but I think there's some of that yin and yang there. But I found that what women respond to more than chaos and more than organization is somewhere in the middle. And I mean, when you think about it from a nature standpoint, it kind of makes sense because reality to a degree is organized chaos. Nature to a degree is organized chaos. You know, it's got its laws and its boundaries, but within those boundaries there is chaos. And creation happens in chaos. Whether you think of childbirth, or whether you think about it from a religious standpoint, or whether you think about it from a scientific Big Bang standpoint, the genesis, pun intended, of creation is chaos. Right? And I think women have a familiarity or let's just say familiarity with that chaos in a way that men don't. And I think that's why we struggle often understanding women and understanding why they don't respond to the things we think they should, or why we aren't getting the results we think we should get based on the things we think they should be responding to. Right? And I think that's what's lost from this, before it was, if you get your money up, then you're going to get bitches. And we found out that was bullshit. Then it was, if you get your looks together, then you're going to get big bitches. And it's like, that's less bullshit, but it's also bullshit if you start getting into the nuances. Right? But I think these are those nuances, and understanding the pathology of women and how they view the world relative to us. And for my Dragon Ball Z folks watching, if I did a poll right now, and y'all feel free to put it in the chat, who was a more interesting character, Goku or Vegeta? Just put it in the chat. You can put V or G, or you can type out Goku or Vegeta. If you're familiar with the DBZ series, who was a more interesting character, Goku or Vegeta? And Gary said Vegeta by far. and I think I think that is the paradox here, that I think women are far more familiar with, and men in a sense are maybe passively familiar with. Because with Vegeta relative to Goku, his story had a redemption arc, right? He started off as a bad guy, and along the way he literally did a 180. Right? It's the pinnacle of character development from an anime standpoint. And if you ask most people who were familiar with that, so you hit my boma, who were familiar with that series, they would also agree that Vegeta was a more compelling, textured, layered character, than Goku, for example. Right? Even my favorite move, even on the video games, is Final Explosion. Like, that shit is amazing. When he sacrificed himself, he thought he was, getting rid of Boo, but that to go from trying to blow up the world to now blowing up yourself for the sake of your family and your friends and things that the old you didn't used to care about. That's range, right? Same thing in Avatar, Prince Zoku. And again, I think oftentimes we don't take a step back to try to find some of these parallels to try to understand the pathology. But when you do, it starts to kind of make sense why, as ridiculous as it seemed to me at first, that Tyrone, from the perspective of a woman, might be more compelling than the actor who plays him, right? Phenotypically, they're the same, but he's got a beard. He's a bit more scruffy. His disposition is a bit more stoic. There's a story here. And from the perspective of a woman, who cares so much about stories, that's going to be more attractive, compelling, etc. Nah, brother, he did a 180. I usually make that mistake. No, he went the other way. 360 would be turning around in a circle and staying where you at. But nah, he did a 180. He's a good guy now. With a grain of salt, because I know now he's got the ultra ego and all that, but which taps into the old Vegeta, but he's still a good guy for all intents and purposes. So moving forward, there was a clip that I've shared before, and I've probably used it in one of my streams. It was a clip of Brother Polite, and he said this theory that I thought is interesting, and I think it also helps us understand the topic at hand. He said that, I think he was asked, what's the secret to women or whatever. And he said that, throughout history, the three types of men who've always had success with women, three archetypes: preachers, teachers, and gangsters. Now, again, if we're looking at this through the lens, pun intended, of filmmaking, part of that reason is because a story about a preacher, a teacher, or a gangster is inherently interesting in a way that a story about an accountant might not be. I know that's changing now. Hollywood is going the route of slice of life and doing stories that seem mundane or about everyday type of people, but the complexity of the everyday, the complexity of the banal. But typically speaking, just from just from a basic level, if you were writing a film and you needed an antagonist, you needed a protagonist, you needed a good guy villain, you're going to think of either dramatic versions of texture or more, everyday versions of texture, like somebody who obsesses over knowledge, somebody who obsesses over God, or somebody who obsesses over money. And, he said that the reason they've always done well with women is because they've got other things that they care about beyond women. Preacher cares about God more than women. God comes before anything. The teacher cares about his work, his studies, the quest for truth, his expedition, whatever it is, his thesis, whatever it is, book. And the gangster cares about money, M-O-B, money over, So the question then is, how can we incorporate some of the nuances of these archetypes in our chiseling of ourselves, right? Because again, I don't think we should change ourselves for women, because that'll come across as well. Like, I was watching the Pop the Balloon show, and it's interesting to see these guys who are trying so hard to sell themselves and it backfires. But I think there is knowledge to get from an understanding of some of these nuanced things that compel women's attention, compel women's interest, maintain women's interest. Because again, the reality I think we have to wrap our heads around is like, women's nature is not one that prefers the mundane. Women's nature is not one that prefers peace. It sounds so fucked up. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's in my opinion, it's healthier from a managing expectation standpoint, from a also giving her the latitude to express the reality of who she is standpoint, to not expect yourself in her, yourself as a man in her, and expect that this is the personification of chaos. Some chaos is larger than others, obviously. And to a degree, my job is to guardrail it, direct it, because it's also powerful, right? And respect it as well. Right? Like using the water and riverbed analogy. The riverbed guides the river, but the river over time expands the riverbed. Women are fucking powerful. So I think you also can't afford to become cynical on the other side of like, women are children, women are immature, whatever the case may be. There should be a healthy symbiotic respect, acknowledgement, and relationship with women, their inherent chaos, and how that manifests in the world. I saw a quote that I want to leave y'all with. The quote said, "Desire lives in the space between where you are and where you want to be." Desire lives in the space between where you are and where you want to be. And for women, you know what I'm saying? That's something I think, whether consciously or unconsciously, I think they're more familiar with or compelled by than men. And I think in our attempt to navigate women, because the reality is, that's what sometimes annoys me about some of these spaces. Like, sometimes there's not an admission that like, yo, we are so pissed off by women because we care about them, because we want them, because we need them, we desire them. And we desire them to behave in these ways that are productive in companionship with us, but we desire them nonetheless. You know, so in while we are also attempting to compel women through our words to be and behave and reform themselves in the ways that we have, observed as objectively productive, it's also important that we also get under the hood and the nuts and bolts and realize, yo, the wiring is completely different. The wiring is completely different, and it's incumbent upon us to understand that. Like I said, for men, we're all about box checking. I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. And even you'll see it also show up in women who are in their masculine energy. I got the degree, I make 6 figures, blah, 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 blah. But you realize what's important to women is not boxes, it's the story. What's the story of how we met? What's the story of our first date? What's the story of, the first time we were around friends? What's the story? So from a perspective of, okay, what do I do with this now? Is start thinking about not the ways that you're performing for her, but what stories that you guys are telling together. Right? Because that's more than just the, you know, the toxic ex standing out to her because she said he had good dick or whatever the case may be. Oftentimes it's also because their story was more interesting. It was toxic as hell. It was dysfunctional as hell. But it was a story nonetheless. Women care about how you make them feel more than anything. It's fucked up, but it's true. And again, I don't mean to come off as any of this shit makes sense. I don't think any of this shit makes sense. I'm just trying to make sense of the nonsense in a way to help myself and hopefully help a brother listening manage his expectations and move in ways that are more efficient and effective with the objects of our desire, which are women. Because, I mean, we can change the manifestation of their femininity, but we can't change the fact that they are the embodiment of chaos. That just is what it is. Right. And more than that, and, you know, Angel brings up a good point. That aspect of their chaotic energy or their chaos is nurtured through media as well. Like, think about it. Women grow up watching fairy tales, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, you know, Seven Dwarfs, etc. And when you start, like, if you watch some of those stories as an adult, you can start seeing some of the nuanced dysfunction in that has been normalized for girls from a very young age, and then segues into romance novels and Shane novels, and then the bureaucracy of middle school and high school, and then when they grow up, it's just that same dysfunction or that same concept of story arcs manifested in different ways. But that's all I got. I'll try to make this into a shorter version of Women Are Filmmakers. I hope some of that made sense. At some points, I was like, none of this shit is making sense, but I kept pushing because it makes sense in my head. I was trying to get it out. If there are any women watching, comment and let me know if I'm completely off or I'm onto something. If there are any men watching who something clicked for you, comment. Let me know if I'm completely off or if I'm onto something. And again, like I said, every single video I make is not necessarily to tell people what to think, but it's mostly to inspire people on how to think, right? How to frame conversations, how to frame these concepts and our expectations. It all goes back to expectations. And I think this gender war, gender dynamic boils down to unfair, unmanaged, unequitable expectations on both sides. And I think the better we get it as women at understanding the nuances of the male disposition, journey, desire, story arc, and the better we get as men at understanding women's pathology and all that nuanced stuff, I think we can get closer to establishing a more sustainable version of harmony. But yeah, I appreciate y'all. I'm not taking any guests tonight, but I'm gonna take a little bit of time just to acknowledge some of the super chats. And also, please consider supporting on Cash App. The Cash App is on the screen. YouTube can't take a cut of that, so it goes straight to supporting the channel. But shout out to my brother Stuart. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate the continued support. It really, really means a lot. My brother Angel, he says, it's simple. Men aren't selling delusions anymore, and benevolent mothers now have a chance to step up or step down and we have been waiting exactly this, or saying exactly this maybe. Let them lead themselves to ruin. And that speaks to the symbiotic relationship that men and women have. Like I say this to women, and they sometimes they don't like it, but a world without men, women wouldn't survive. But on the flip side, a world without women, men would survive, but we wouldn't want to. Right? And I think it speaks to the nuances of our perspectives and our contributions to reality and society and community, and how those things are supposed to work in tandem. But yeah, that's all I got. Relatively short stream. I'm not doing my brother Noble says I do Nollywood films sometimes. Nah, but I'm gonna keep this one succinct. Appreciate y'all. Make sure you check out the video they posted today. Check out some more videos on the channel. Go into the video tab and sort it by oldest, popular, newest. Just make sure you're caught up. If you're joining from Instagram, please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. Thank y'all for the support. Again, consider supporting the stream, supporting the channel by hitting that Cash App. And I'll see you guys soon.